There's going to be some interactive elements to today, so please feel free to become familiar with who you're sitting near, because there's going to be some questions and discussion points on today's session. So today is all about future-proofing your finances. So when you're a business owner, you're trying to manage your business, your personal finances, it can sometimes feel like you're making it up as you go along. Trying to navigate this without much information yourself. You're trying to run your business, you're trying to focus on your craft or on your skill, and then to run a business alongside that. So hopefully this session will help bring to light some tools that you can use to start figuring out how to become more confident with your finances. So as just a starter, I just want to talk about the pandemic briefly and say everyone has a story. So this is not just for the pandemic, but in general, when we're looking at our lives, when we look back at our what I call money story, all of us have different ways that we've come to where we are now, different views on money, different upbringings, and it's led to how we are now, how we feel about our money, and how we operate our finances. So there's a fine line between when we're thinking of the emotional side of understanding how we feel and our relationship with money, alongside the practical side of how we manage them better, how we make them work for us so that we're able to build and grow our businesses and grow our finances alongside it. So at the moment, we're in a particular period of time where there's an unprecedented amount of uncertainty with money, even more so than maybe we felt previously. There's personal debt, there's business debts. We've all been given opportunities, well, not everybody, but some people have had access to more loans, more support from the government, whether you're self-employed, whether you're limited companies. And this maybe have left you in a position where financially you're struggling. We're looking at a time where we're in a capitalist society, so spending is part of that. So our spending patterns are skyrocketing. The amount of access we have to credit is much higher than it used to be, so we're spending outside our means. We're also facing inflation, the cost of bills are rising, and then there's this whole new age of money, which is the crypto era. So we're moving into new ways of understanding finances as well. So there's a lot. So it can sometimes feel overwhelming. So I wanted to help bring this down and make it a bit more real and a bit more relatable to you, your circumstances, where you're at now. So maybe where you're at is that you've started your business already. Actually, I'd love to see a raise of hands. Who has a business already, has their own business? Great, so everybody in the room pretty much, yeah. So maybe you're looking at ways to try and get on top of your debts, whether that's personal or business debts. Maybe you're looking to invest or buy property. Maybe you don't know how to start your investment journey. And when I'm talking about that, I mean personal and business finance. So we're not just talking about one or the other. Maybe your pensions come up. You've been thinking about how you can increase your future investments to have there for when you come to wanting to retire or stop working, although as business owners it seems that that's never going to happen, right? And maybe it's just that grind of every month you're trying to make money and there's that ebb and flow, so you want to stop living kind of invoice to invoice or paycheck to paycheck. So let's break this down a bit further for you. So in the masterclass today, it's aimed specifically at small business owners, so I'm really glad to hear that all of you are in that arena, because it helps just to tailor the content. It's going to be quite practical, as I said and Kate said before. The workbooks on your desk, that's just for you to take notes. You can use them or not. There's some prompts in there which we'll be going throughout the session, but feel free to scribble on that and make it your own. I always say when we're talking about finance, come with an open heart and an open mind, because this may be stuff you've never spoken about before. So talking about finance can be uncomfortable, and my goal, the reason I call my business Get Comfy with Money, is that I want everyone to feel more ease and comfort with finance. It's not about setting targets for how much you should be trying to earn or aiming for. It's about what you want, what you need, and how we can improve your relationship with finance so that you feel better about your own circumstances. There will be a small break in the middle, and then there's time for Q&As at the end. So if you have any questions that are relevant to what we're speaking about, feel free to raise your hand. We'll come around with the microphone just so we can make sure everyone can hear what's being asked. But if there's anything that you want to save towards the end, feel free to take a note, and then at the end I can answer any more specific questions as well. And just one more note to say, I'm a financial coach and a business mentor, so this is not a financial advice that I'm going to be giving during this session. Everything we're talking about is for educational purposes, and I'm just demonstrating and showing some tips and tools that I've used in my own journey. So feel free to take what you feel could be useful on, but just understand it's not financial advice. and just a little bit about the outcomes. So what I wanted to do for you today in the program that I've created is to help you to figure out how to become more financially resilient. So this is something that happens over time. It's not going to be an hour together today and you walk away free, happy, making loads of money. That'd be great. I wish I had cards that I could hand out. But at least if you can walk away feeling a little bit more confident about your finances and have a plan, so you know what those next steps might look like to help you become more financially resilient. We're also going to look a little bit into your pricing and how that's attached to your worth. And we're going to figure out that balance, that fine line between your business and your personal finances, and how we can make that move with a bit more ease. So by the end, I hope you have some action steps to walk away with that you can then take forward and apply in your own businesses. All right, so how does that sound? Everyone ready to delve in? Wonderful. So to start with, I love to set an intention so that we all kind of know what we're here for, what we're trying to do. So what I'd love for you to do is just take a moment to just write down for yourself what your intention is for this masterclass. The foundations of financial independence. So we're looking at how these different elements of finance impact you as a business owner. So what you'll see on the front page of your worksheet is an outline of the 5 foundations that we're going to go through today. So feel free to scribble as we go. We're going to start right at the bottom there. And the first one we're going to be looking at is debt. So debt, it's a big word, it's a scary word, it's an intimidating word. There's a lot of emotions that can come up around debt. So it could be shame or guilt, embarrassment around getting yourself into debt. On the other side, maybe you're scared of debt and you don't want to have anything to do with it. So you won't touch a credit card, you won't go anywhere near trying to get in debt because it's a very scary prospect. And when it comes to my story with debt, so just to give you a bit of background on myself, so I decided to become an entrepreneur when I was in my early 20s, so about 15 years ago. And when I set off, I had this idea I just wanted to do something. So I chose a business idea, which was selling oversized yoga mats. So I made round and square mats, and I did a massive order from China, and I ended up in £27,000 of credit card debt. So that's kind of where my journey, I think, starts when it comes to finance. So I had to figure out what to do with this debt, figure out how to get out of the debt. But the first part was how I talk about it in the first place and actually admit that I'd done this and come to terms with the fact that I needed help. So I understand how it feels to be in debt and understand the process involved in trying to make that, to pay it off and come out of the other side. So it took me about 10 years to get to a position where I was able to pay it all off and become credit card debt free, and that was really challenging. So I know how it feels to be stuck in that feeling of debt. So I just want to say that first of all, I'm talking from a place of knowing how it feels to be there. During the pandemic as well, a lot of us had to pivot. We had to change what we were doing. There was an opportunity. I had to take out a mini loan at the beginning of the pandemic because all my work used to be with clients face-to-face who were in industries of live events. So I used to work with musicians and athletes and public speakers, and all of their work stopped. So then their work with me stopped. So I had to kind of venture into that again, and all the feelings about debt came up again, and the worry I had about falling into it. So one thing I would love to share to start with is that 63% of UK adults in 2020 had personal debt. So this isn't including mortgages. This isn't just personal debt from loans and credit cards. So if you are in debt or if you've experienced debt before, you're not alone. This is something that so many people are facing. And I'd love if everyone's brave, a show of hands, if anyone's in debt or has been in debt before. I have, and I still am. Yeah, so if you just look around the room, pretty much everyone's put them up and then down straight away. But pretty much everybody in the room has just raised their hand. So it goes to show, right, we're not alone in this. So what I want you to do now is just have a little chat with the person you're sitting next to or around about your feelings around debt. So you don't have to tell anyone you're in debt or how much you're in unless you want to, but just let's talk about it. Let's just open the conversation about our feelings towards debt. So just take a couple of minutes. A couple of words that came up then, like good debt versus bad debt. I heard assets. I heard people who've been in debt, come out of it, worried to go back into it. So I wanted to explore a little bit further into what your ideas are about good debt and bad debt, because it's a good starting point. It's a good place to start reflecting on, because not all debt is created equal, and some debt may be useful or helpful to help you get where you need to within your business and your personal life too. So when we're talking about good debts, these generally relate to things that are going to leave you better off in the long run. They're not going to have a negative impact on you in your overall financial position in the future, and there's a way that you're going to be able to pay them back. So just make a note, if you like, of what you would consider good debts and debts that you have or you're happy to have. And on the other side, we have the ideas of what bad debt are. So bad debt is generally debt that's not affordable to pay back, or there's no realistic plan that you can have to make sure you're keeping up with those repayments, or there's not going to generate any future investment opportunity for you with that money. So think about what you would consider bad debt. So this is just for you to take away and start thinking about a bit further with your debt. Feel free to discuss that as well if it's something that comes up. So, and one other thing just to note before we move on is, just because debt's the bottom layer, it doesn't mean you have to be completely debt-free or have figured out how to pay it off before you can start looking into your other areas of finance. The goal is to have a plan, to know what you're doing with your debt, and if you need support, there's many ways you can get support out there. If you need to talk to somebody to figure out a plan, there's helplines, and even just talking to someone that you trust or you know, that could be a good starting point. So what I'd love for you to do now is just to write down for yourself your action steps. So if there's something that you need to do in this area of debt, maybe you want to explore your feelings about it more, maybe you need to figure out a plan for getting out of debt, maybe you want to look at how you can get into debt. So just write down for yourself an action step you'd like to take away to do with your debt. There's an action checklist page on the worksheet if you want to put them on there. So we're going to move away from debt. For me, it's important for us to touch a little bit on each of the different elements. You can come back and look into this in more detail if it feels important to you. So we're going to move on to the next foundational element, which is spending. I don't know about you, but I love spending. I'm really good at spending. This is probably my area of expertise with my finances. So spending can feel out of control at times. I'm a complete bank account avoider, so I try not to look at my bank account if I know I'm spending too much, because I know that I'm not going to like what I see. This is a pattern I've had to get myself out of, so I force myself to look at my finances monthly enough times now that it's more natural. If you're a business owner, you're probably well versed in the fact that money doesn't come regularly every day on that same day, so it's hard to control what we're spending because we don't necessarily know when the money's coming and how much is coming regularly. When I first started my business, I didn't really know what the profit was going to look like. So sometimes I was spending without really taking into consideration what that spending was making me. So our relationship with spending is really important. And we can look at this as the basis of budgeting, right? So it's just another word for budgeting. So when we're looking at our finances and we're trying to look at that cross-section between our business and our personal finances, I always say the starting point is a personal survival budget. So essentially what you cost to live. So how much you cost in your personal life to cover all your bills, your expenses, any savings goals, any insurance that you have to pay, or childcare fees, whatever it is that you need to pay for to be able to survive, to live. And when you're a small business owner, a lot of the time, especially at the start, your business decisions are very much impacted by your personal finances because they're very closely linked. So we want to start with our personal finances first. So it's a good idea to get really familiar with your budget, and I'm happy to send a link to a budget template if you're interested in that after the session. So if you remind me, Kate, I'll do that. So that you can start getting familiar with your finances, what they look like overall. A surprising number of people actually don't even know how much they cost to live each month. So hands up if you don't know how much you cost to live. This isn't a name and shame. This is more just, yeah, would you be able to say how much you cost each month to live and to run your business? Yeah, most of you? No, sort of, maybe? So yeah, just getting, what was that?
We're just saying down to the last penny.
Down to the last penny. Love it. So getting really familiar with your costs and how much everything's costing you to get by within your business and in your personal life is really key starting point. And then it's also a good idea to allocate some money for guilt-free spending. So sometimes we sit there and we spend money and we feel guilty because we're not really sure what we're spending and how much we're spending and whether we can afford it. So if you put aside a certain amount of money each month for fun spending that you're allowed to spend so that you feel good about it rather than guilt-ridden. I've got a client who she has an Amazon allowance. She calls it her Amazon allowance because she loves spending on Amazon. So every month she transfers, because you can put credit in Amazon, so she will transfer a certain amount each month and she's allowed to spend that in Amazon. Once it's out, it's out. So that's her way to kind of have that guilt-free spending approach. So what I want you to do is to turn again to your group or your partner and just talk about what you would like to be able to allocate more money to within your business. So are there certain areas that you can't put money into at the moment that you would like to be able to spend on? Let's have a little bit of a reflection on that. So if you had more money, or if you do need more money right now, what is that area within your business that you'd like to be able to have more money to spend on? So now we've sort of whet our appetites a little bit with spending and thinking about our spending and our future ideas of things we'd like to have more finances for within business. I'd love for you to now write down your action step for your spending. So is there something that needs to happen next? So we don't have to think big future here, just thinking a little bit short term right now. What's your next action step when it comes to spending? What's the first thing that you need to do to kick into gear anything that you've started to think about plan-wise? Saving. So good old saving. So when I first started as a business owner, savings didn't exist. I jumped straight in from full-time work into trying to run my own thing, and I actually went straight from no money to debt rather than using savings. That was my experience. So I never really thought about having a reserve of money there set aside for emergencies. It was all kind of definitely living month by month, trying to make it work, trying to make the bills, to make sure the bills were covered, make sure I had enough to keep things going. And as I said before, when it came to the pandemic, all my contracts paused, and that's when I really realized that having an emergency savings fund was crucial to be able to continue going. So it's really easy to look back and think that now. However, you can get to that point at any point. You can start establishing your savings in a way that's going to help align, one, with your kind of emergency needs, but also your longer term goals. So sometimes it's easy to forget about our savings goals because we're so in it, we're here right now, we're just trying to make it work, and we're not necessarily thinking too long term. So with this section, I just wanted to explore a little bit more how we can start looking at the different areas of savings and the different ways we may want to start bringing this in to our routines. So we're going to be looking at personal and business savings. So personal savings, there's multiple different ways you can look at this. I like to break it down into 4 areas with your personal finance. And that's your freedom fund, which is like your pot of money to set aside just in case of an emergency. So if you need to dip in, if work's slow, if something happens and you don't have any income for a while, you know you have a reserve of money there just in case. Then you've got your short-term savings, which is a lot of the time easy to see as just a nice to have. It's not always a priority in our mind, but it is important for our happiness and our well-being to ensure we're kind of achieving some of those short-term goals that we have so we can keep ourselves sustained as we try and keep running our business. Then we have our longer term goals, which are maybe put aside that you're not going to touch for 5, 10 years. Could be like the slightly bigger goals that you have with your savings. And then you've got your lifetime savings or your pension. So these could be investments or ways you're putting money aside for when and if you can retire. So you have still got that income coming for you. So this is the way we can start thinking about personal savings. And then when we're looking at our business savings, it's sort of similar, but there's some extra elements to consider. And I guess with your personal savings as well, tax is something that still comes into it. But when you have your business, you want to have that emergency fund. You want to have that reserve of cash that's just there just in case you need to dip into it. This is also important for things like if you are paid by invoice, maybe you don't get paid on time, maybe you don't get as much as expected. So having that reserve of money will ensure cash flow, which is also really important when you're a small business trying to make ends meet. Then you've got your short and your long-term savings goals as well, and then tax savings. So just some numbers. I'm sure you're all familiar with these already, but just starting to think about maybe putting aside money ahead of time rather than paying it off last minute when you get to January or your end of tax year and you've got to fumble to get all that money together. So there's a QR code there, which is actually on the back of the worksheet as well. If you just want, there's a really good calculator if you're self-employed and you want to figure out what you should put aside for taxes. That just will help you kind of piece that together.
How is there a percentage or a rule on how to break down those areas? So if you're running a business, should it be 10%, 5%, 20%?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so there's no direct formula because it completely depends on what your needs are. So I do have a spreadsheet that breaks down savings goals though, which when I send that link to Kate, she can pass it on. It's a really good way to break up all the goals. So you're considering your short and your long-term savings goals against each other. So it's not a matter of once you've reached X amount with the short-term goals, you move on to the long-term goals. You can have those multiple savings goals running all at the same time. But if you just organize it to start with so you know what you're putting away for each different goal, that's a really good way to organize it. There's generally, if you're self-employed, there's so many different opinions out there. You could just go for a blanket amount of, say, 30%, and then that's what you save for every invoice. You may want to work it out. So if you use that calculator and you see how much you're making monthly, it's quite good at showing you a good reflection of how much to put aside. Yeah. Yeah, or with your personal finance, you may want to set, like people as a blanket figure say 10% is a good amount to save, but that number can be intimidating and mean you don't save anything. So I always say start small, even if it's 2% or 3% that you can save, putting that aside first and building it up over time rather than trying to achieve a big number that's not reachable when you're not earning enough. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool. So yeah, what are your personal and your business savings goals? Have a discussion about that. So I want to move on to starting to explore what our emergency fund looks like. So some people here may have already set one up. Amazing. If you're not quite there yet and you want to know where to start, this is a really good first goal for your savings. So if you want to build yourself a pot that's your reserve, you could call it your crisis fund, your freedom fund, emergency, whatever word appeals to you. I call mine my mojo fund because it gives me mojo to keep going with my business. So whenever I look at that in my account, I feel like I can keep going. I can keep making it happen. So it's a really simple equation. Find out what your monthly expenses are overall with your business and your personal finances all together. And then think about what your risk threshold is. So maybe you want 3 months of security, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 12. So write down for yourself what that looks like. So how much of a buffer you would want just in case something happens. And then you times that by the amount that it costs, and that's your goal. So that's how much you want to aim to try and save or put aside into your emergency fund. And once you've reached that amount, you want to try and keep it at that level. So whenever you dip into it, you want to keep trying to top that up. It could take a little while to reach, but it's a really good way to kind of ease that stress, especially as a business owner, that we feel with that short-term stresses of cash flow and trying to make sure that we can make ends meet. So have a think about what your emergency fund number looks like. And yeah, just a few extra tips on saving. So try and save first, not last. So it always sounds good when you look at your bank account and you're like, great, I'll just see how I go this month. And then whatever's left in my account, I'll save, right? Never happens. Some people maybe, but for me, definitely not. So try and get into the habit of putting your savings aside first when you first receive the money, rather than at the end if there's anything left. Having goals is really a great way to ensure you actually reach those savings goals that you have. So sometimes if you just have a pot of money and you call that savings, it's not very motivational, so it can be hard to continue to put money in there. You don't want to put too much in there that then means you're constantly dipping in, which is why having that guilt-free spending idea is also good, because be a bit more realistic with how much you know you're going to spend, rather than trying to save everything and then all month just keep transferring that back across. That feeling can be a bit dissatisfying. So yeah, it is, I do want to acknowledge that it's a privilege to be able to save. So again, don't think you have to go in and save 10%, 20% of your income. Try and find a plan that works for you and start small and just be consistent with it. So consistently putting in a small amount. Time goes so fast, you'll look back in your account and you'll be like, wow, there's actually money there. So just because you can't save a lot doesn't mean you shouldn't start. And there's a really lovely book called The Richest Man in Babylon, and it's kind of full of parables around money. And one thing they say is that what you save is the only part you keep. And I love that, because when I first looked at savings, I always imagined it as withholding money from myself. So I felt like I was not allowed to enjoy that money, when really everything else goes away. It's given to everything else we do. So the only money you actually keep is what you save. So it can be like something that's more honoured and cherished rather than withholding. All right, so I thought maybe we could do our action step for saving. So if you have a goal, anything in particular that you'd like to achieve in the area of saving, maybe just write down your first step for what that looks like. So we're moving on to the next foundation of financial independence, one that I'm sure all of us are very familiar with, or familiar with not having enough of: income. So when it comes to income, we're talking about passive income, we're talking about active income, we're talking about what we have to generate to make profit, we're talking about different streams of income, different ways we can make money. Maybe we have a job and we have a side hustle, maybe our side hustles become our business, maybe we've always been business owners, and there's always this feeling that we need more. So we don't have enough, we're not abundant enough, we don't have enough coming in to cover all of the bills that we have, all the things that we want to do and achieve with our lives and with our businesses. And one thing as a financial coach that I will never tell you is how much you need to be striving to make. So I'm not going to say you need to become a $1 million or pound six-figure business owner, or you need to hit 10K months, anything like that. This is about what you need to hit, what you need to make to make your ends meet and more. So what I want to explore with this is a little bit around our worth. So when we're trying to establish what we're wanting to make and what we want to charge for our services, it can sometimes feel really challenging to assign a financial value to what we actually attribute to our strengths and our area of expertise and what we're really good at. So I want you to take a moment to just reflect on any of the things that you think you measure your own self-worth against. So net worth, for example. Do you find that you judge your pricing, how much you are worth, or your own self-worth based on how much you make? So whether that's income, whether you have lots of possessions, whether you have financial assets, is that a way that you judge your own worth? Or maybe it could be what you do. So do you find that you feel better when you're more successful in certain eyes? So is there your work or your business ventures or things that you achieve in your personal life that you would attribute to building up you feeling like you're worth more if you have them? Is it to do with what you achieve? So do you have a way of judging your worth based on your success in business, or how well you grade if you do some type of exams, or if you're a sporting athlete? What about your to-do list? Is it to do with how much you manage to get done? So do you feel worthy when you've ticked off everything on your list for the day? And therefore, if you don't tick them all off, you've not achieved what you needed to. Is it to do with your following? So how many supporters you have, or engagements that you have, whether that's online, in social media, or in real life? Or do you judge your worth against other people? So how they're going, what they've achieved, what they have? Or is it your qualifications? So your credentials, your education, or your ability to offer certain products or services. So just have a moment and just write down for yourself what you think you price your worth against. And there's no right or wrong answer. Maybe none of these exist for you. Maybe there's other things. Maybe you feel that your worth is unshakable, which is amazing. But just have a think and feel free to discuss that with your groups as well. So how you currently price yourself, how you currently measure your self-worth.
I said, actually, can you hear me? It doesn't sound anything. Sorry. Yeah, so I was looking at what you do, and actually things that I've achieved in sort of my personal life and, you know, stuff. I've kind of I'm really proud of that. And maybe the last in terms of my qualifications and things that helps me in my business, you know, when I'm freelancing. So those were like the two. When I was looking at the others, because I've not really even considered it like your to-do list. So for me, I mean, I do it, but I'm not consistent, so I can start it today and not even go back to it and remember that everything's kind of like in my head. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, for me, my to-do list is probably one of my biggest judges of self-worth, because I'm like, if I haven't ticked it off, I feel disappointed in myself. I feel like I didn't get anything done. So it's like this constant wheel of trying to prove to myself that I can do it. Does anyone else want to share what came up for them? Yeah?
I was saying how I've always put my worth on the usual, like your education and qualifications. However, I've got lots of friends who's always said, but you've got all this life experience, so you should always base it off of that. But I've never been, we were just talking about, you would base that on the confidence that you have in what it is that you've put out there. But in order to get that confidence, you need life experience. So it's a weird one for me, what I'm basing it on. I'm just not sure yet.
Yeah, basically. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing. I think that imposter syndrome can kind of play in when you're feeling like you're not qualified enough in what you do to be giving the product or service or advice that you're providing. And yeah, there is that fine line, isn't there, between credentials or having it on paper, certification, versus life experience, and how they play out and make you feel more confident or not. So yeah, with that, just take that as a reflection, a way to think about and just be mindful of, because when you're trying to price yourself, these are some of the things that are probably coming into play. So you're thinking about maybe your lack of qualifications or certifications to allow you to charge the prices that you'd like to charge. Or maybe this dialogue you're having around what you do being so important takes you away from what you really want to do, because you feel you need to have an established job in a certain industry. So you're not focusing on what your passions really are. So let's look a bit into needs versus wants. So this ties in quite well with what we were just speaking about, because there's the amount we need to earn versus the amount that we want to earn. And so much of the time when people say, how much do you want to earn? We just pluck a number out. We just say, oh, I want to make $1 million. I want to hit this amount of money. And one, that's not necessarily a realistic representation of what you need to make. But two, it might also not even resonate with you. So when we're looking at our income levels of how much we need to make sure we're covering all our bills, that's one number. So that's your needs number. So get really familiar, get really comfortable with your needs number, as we spoke about in spending. And then you can start thinking more about what your wants number is. So if you had all of your needs covered, everything was ticking along, what is that extra amount that you want on top that's actually going to give you the lifestyle that you want, allow you to take more risks, to learn more, to expand your business, to grow, to follow what those goals might be within your personal life and in your business. So that wants amount comes into play later. And what's interesting is you might not be as far away as you think you are. So just looking at the numbers, it's all about data at the end of the day. So we can attach data and real, like, rational thoughts and statistics and figures to what our dreams are, what our goals are. So we want to get into that place where we're really familiar with our needs versus our wants. So I want to talk about the pricing sweet spot. Now, this is really good if you're in a service industry, but it's also applicable if you have products as well. So you may just want to think about it depending on what your industry, what your job is. It might need to just be tweaked slightly. But what I want you to just have a go at, attempt, is to figure out a number that you would call your pricing sweet spot. So how much you want to charge. So maybe right now you're charging what you want to, you feel really good about that number, you feel comfortable saying it. Maybe you're charging less than you know you're worth. Maybe you know that you need to up your rates, but you're nervous to go in and explore that and actually change your pricing. Maybe you feel like you're overcharging. So wherever you're at with your pricing right now, let's just look at it as a really simple equation. So write down how much you want to be making each month. It could be need, so you can follow your needs number or your wants number. And then write down how much you want to work each month. So is that project-based? So you want to do one project a month? Do you want to do 10 hours a week? Do you want to work full-time? So just write down what that looks like for you in how much you want to work. Don't say zero.
Leah,
Yes.
the rate, is that an hourly rate or a day rate that will come out as?
Good question. So it completely depends on what your industry is. So some people charge hourly. It could be a project rate. It could be a day rate. It could be a product cost. So if there's an item that you sell, selling it at a certain number. So choose the one that's applicable to you. So you want to figure out what that amount is per month that you want to make and how many hours you want to work for, and then divide that number, and that becomes your rate for the purpose of this exercise. If you have multiple products and services as well, just start with one, just so you can start fleshing out the basis of it. And when you got that number, is that number reflective of what you're currently charging? So keep in mind here your worth. When we're talking about your financial worth, it's not dependent on what somebody says they will or won't pay you. It's completely dependent on what you're willing to accept. So the part that can be challenging is, especially now I've noticed, a lot of jobs will ask you to tell them the rates rather than giving you a set rate that they will pay you, which sometimes makes it challenging because you're sitting there wondering what you should say. You don't want to overcharge, you don't want to undercharge, and it feels really hard to stand behind your decision for what your costs are, and you're constantly questioning it, second guessing it. So we want to get you really comfortable with your figures, so you know if someone asks you what you charge, you can comfortably say it. You can comfortably tell them what your rate is or what the quote would be. And on that note, you might need a little bit more time to finish up that equation, but I want you to now be really brave and share your pricing sweet spot with the person next to you. So I want you to say it out loud, because if you can't say it to the person next to you, how are you going to say it to a customer or a potential client? So let's just play around with this a bit. So start with a number that you feel comfortable saying, and you can just say to your partner, I charge £100 per hour, let's say. And if that feels too much, lower it. So you can say a little bit less. You can say, I charge 80 per hour, and keep going until you feel like you're at a comfortable spot. So the space that feels like the right number, your pricing sweet spot, will feel a little bit uncomfortable, but not like you're too sick and you won't actually say it. So I hope that was insightful for you and that you were brave enough to share that, because it probably felt a bit alien if you haven't done it before, but over time you want to practice that so it becomes just as comfortable as telling people what you do. So moving on from there, if you just want to note what your action step is when it comes to the area of income. So what's your next step? Do you need to look at ways to make more money? Do you need to address your pricing and get really clear on your offer? Do you need to maybe expand your product or service offerings? Is it around creating a side business? What is it that you need to do when it comes to the area of income? So we're moving on to the final foundation of financial independence. Anyone want to guess what it is? What's missing? Investing, so the cherry on top. So when you've got all the rest of your areas sorted, feeling comfortable, you might be in a position to be ready to start thinking about investing. So when I started my investment journey, I felt like I knew nothing. I didn't go to uni, I didn't get any degrees, I knew nothing about finance. I grew up in a low-income family. We were on benefits. I didn't know what it looked like to even consider investing, and it seemed really intimidating, especially as a woman, and I didn't know where to start. So it was like just stabbing in the dark. So I wanted to start building up my own consistently, but for me it was always important to have knowledge, so to understand what investing is, because when I first started, investing was putting money in stocks and shares. That's all I thought about. So when I think about and talk about investing, it's not necessarily a set thing or a set pattern. So this is a really great Chinese proverb. When's the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago. When's the second best time? Right now. So this is how I think of investing. It's never too late to start, and it's also not too early. So you don't need to have years of experience and understanding and knowledge to start looking into it. It's also not too late for you to start. So you may feel like you've missed the boat, but that's not the case either. So I want to explore a bit about what investing means to you. So for me, it used to mean the stock market. Now it means so much more than that. I think about investing in my business, investing in my health and well-being, investing in cryptocurrency, buying a house. There's so many different things it could mean, but essentially it's putting your money to grow, so it does the work for you. So just explore with your groups what investing means to you and what you're interested in investing in, or what you already do, and what you definitely don't want to. So I'll give you a little bit longer on this because there's quite a few questions there, but just think about what investing means to you and what you want to ensure that you're looking into when it comes to your own investing journey. Your investing journey, and you want to figure out where to go next. So first of all, biggest bit of advice is learn. So expose yourself to loads of content, join groups. There's so many Facebook groups and Instagram pages out there that you can follow to learn about investing, and start talking about it. So if someone's investing in a way that you're interested in, talk to them. So if someone is investing in stocks and shares and you want to know more, ask them about their journey. So rather than being shy about those conversations and the fact that you don't maybe have the knowledge, start reaching out and trying to encourage yourself to be open and curious to new things. Investing is always a risk, so I always say a disclaimer: only invest what you're willing to lose. Some investments are more risky than others, so always look at the facts and understand what it is that you're getting into before you make any decisions. Consistency is important as well, so it's not about throwing money and not doing anything further. So figure out what your choice of investing is and choose to do it consistently. I've written dollar cost averaging in brackets because it's a term that's used in investing around not trying to predict the market. So you're not trying to go, oh, it's really good right now, now's the time to buy or sell, and when the market's low, trying to predict that, because we can't predict. So it's about investing consistently no matter what, and over time it averages out. And then most importantly, invest in things that you're passionate about, because you're not going to keep them up and continue putting in the work to understanding them if you don't care. So just have a think about what that looks like for you when you're looking at investing. So what's your final action step to take away from today's session? So think about what it is with your investing journey that you want to do next. Do you need to set up an account for crypto? Do you want to have a look into understanding investment more? Do you want to invest in your business? Is there something you need to do in your personal life to improve your health? So think about what your next investment step would look like. I hope you've had a little bit of an eye-opener to different areas of finance in your own life. To sum up, I'd love for you to just reflect on what your biggest takeaway is from today. So if you were to write down or say one thing that you feel that you're taking away from this session, please do, and I'd love if you'd share those. So if anyone's willing to share with the group what their biggest takeaway is from everything we've gone through, maybe we can bring the microphone around. Yeah? Who'd like to share? I'm going to pick on some people. Bruno, what's your biggest takeaway?
Me? Oh, wow. My
You're
voice...
smiling at me so nicely.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I believe that I'm always really looking after my business, but I don't look after as much my personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe my biggest takeaway today is to understand that to have more head space and more energy to give to my business, I also have to look more. I also have to look after my personal finance, so I don't have that stress of every month having to worry about little stuff, and just worry about me as much as I worry about my business and my staff. I think that was it.
Love it. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else got a takeaway to share? Yeah.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway is actually to really sit down and look at my finances, especially like personal, and the actions is actually put in timelines to the actions that I say that I want to like do in order to achieve it. So that's what I'm going to look at where I am at, and put timelines and work towards those timelines.
Love it. So you've got like 5 or so action steps to take away. So now you're going to put some deadlines in place. Lovely. And one more share. Anyone? Yeah, the back there.
Thank you. I think my takeaway from everything you said is around that if you just do little bits now and then, keeping on top of things. You mentioned monitoring your accounts every month, investing a little bit here and there and putting things away. It's really not as scary as I thought. So yeah, that's what I've taken. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think we have this feeling sometimes we have to always be motivated, and I think it's the difference between motivation and discipline. So when the motivation's not there, the discipline has to kick in, and that's how we keep on top of things if we're consistently doing small bits over time and not trying to cram it all in at once. So for example, tax time always comes the same time each year, and we always sit there 2 days before pulling our hair out. So we could put more healthy habits in place. So we're looking at our finances monthly, which helps us make better long-term decisions as well. So thanks for sharing. That's great to hear. So the last thing I just wanted to say is where you can go from here. So I don't want your journey to finish here and that's it. You put this paper away and you forget all the action steps that you've set. So if you want to hear or see more, you can follow us on Instagram at Get Comfy with Money. We also have a community group session that we do every month on the first Tuesday at 7 p.m, which is on Zoom, and it's free, and it's called Finance and Chill, and we sit and we do our finances together. So it sounds boring, but it's really great for accountability. So if you want to be part of a group that we just sit there and we motivate each other to actually get those tasks done. I usually use that time to do my own as well. So I might put together invoices, check my budget, figure out my goals for the next month. So it's a really good way to just get into that pattern. And you may just sit there with Zoom on and have my voice muted, but you just have that space to be doing it. So if that's what you want, you can. If you have questions, you can always ask as well. So feel free to come and join. If you want to know more, you can just scan that QR code, which is on the back sheet as well, to get in touch with me. And if you want some more support, you can also book one-on-one sessions with me. So if you want to find out more, I offer a business alignment audit. We look at your business, we look at your personal and your business finances side by side and figure out a plan for you. I know Kate's also going to mention the mentoring program. I believe there's some slots still available. Yep, so there's also free mentoring available through the program as well. But I hope you've all enjoyed